And we are back. Welcome to Justin and Donald Save America. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. We're going to get right into it. First off, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, joined by Justin Haskins. Justin, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Great to be with you.
Fantastic. Well, like this show always talks about, we're always trying to find the issues that are sprouting up that probably aren't getting the attention that they deserve, but demand it. So this first story that we're going to be talking about is something that should be alarming basically to everybody. Anyone that's a parent, anyone that's a teacher, anyone that's an American who believes that schools should teach and not indoctrinate. So Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, has announced a formal curriculum partnership with none other than one of the favorites of me and Justin, the World Economic Forum. Yes, the same World Economic Forum that talks about owning nothing and being happy, eating the bugs, and surrendering national sovereignty in the name of climate justice, equity. We've talked about the World Economic Forum a million times when it comes to the ESG scheme. If there's a globalist plot going on, you know that the World Economic Forum has some role in it. And so, of course, now they want to be involved in your children's classroom. So, what? They want to help out when it comes to reading, writing, arithmetic? No, of course not. This is about turning the classroom into a globalist training ground, funneling World Economic Forum ideology straight into the minds of American students, all while parents are kept in the dark. So, reading from the article, it says Randy Weingarten announced on Friday that the American Federation of Teachers, which claims to have a 1.7 million members, is partnering with the World Economic Forum to create a curriculum that will lead to good jobs and solid careers in U.S. manufacturing. So the AFT is the second largest teachers union in the United States. I was going to say world. I don't know if that's true. In the United States, at the very least, second only to the NEA, which is the National Education Association. So again, reading from this article, they have quoted Randy Weingarten, the president of that union, saying the goal of education should be to cultivate the skills necessary to succeed in our rapidly changing world, not to create good test takers, she said. That will require our education system to move beyond stifling accountability models that narrow what teachers can teach, condemn kids to low quality, high stakes standardized tests and excessive test prep, and do nothing to improve learning. Weingarten made the announcement at the 2025 AFT convention, where the union also adopted a number of radical resolutions, including resolutions in support of statehood for the District of Columbia, in opposition to Trump administration's detention and deportation of foreign radicals on student visas, in support of the advancement of gender ideology in schools, for gender affirming medical care, and for boys and girls sports, and in support of Black Lives Matter and other radical groups to fight efforts by conservatives and parental advocacy groups to rid schools of woke propaganda. So, Justin, the details of this partnership are few and far between. Not sure what the World Economic Forum is what role they're gonna play exactly. The speculation is that it's going to revolve around sustainability, climate alarmist rhetoric. I use speculation lightly because, as the article reads, in a resolution adopted at the convention titled Climate Smart and Sustainable Schools, the union cites the claim by the World Economic Forum, quote, that urgency is our only savior when talking about climate crisis. So, Justin, public schools, teachers unions, World Economic Forum, this just seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. It's amazing it hasn't happened already in a lot of ways. But I mean, this is the kind, I mean, we've known for a long time that the teachers unions are, far left-wing institutions. They've got an ideological bent. They're certainly not a middle of the road group or right leaning or anything like that. But what is incredible is just how open they are about it now. I think that's the part that's changed. And really, it's changed with a lot of institutions in our society in the Trump era. A lot of institutions just kind of came out and said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We're actually for like all these crazy left-wing causes.
Right.
And we weren't, they didn't used to admit that. Like the teachers unions used to be presented as, we're just for the kids. We're just helping the kids and helping the teachers. And we're just for common sense, reforms. We want teachers to be paid well. And that was like that was their thing. Now it's like, no, we got to teach them, Black Lives Matters, and we got to have the World Economic Forum, involved, and we're going to get involved in the immigration debates now. They're like, as if they're like immigration reform experts or something,
Sure.
which is
Right.
insane. I mean, it's just, they're just so out in the open now, and that to me is really one of the biggest takeaways. The other thing is,
Well, wait.
they knew when they did this was going to be like a huge scandal.
Well,
and they did it anyway.
Before we get to that point, I want to talk about what you were just talking about, how teachers unions used to be about whatever, right? I don't know. Is that just the popular perception of it? Because like I think we've known, and definitely people that have been kind of the finger on the pulse of just the public education system for a while, they've known that that's not what the teachers unions have been for like, what was that one quote? I was trying to look it up. It was some like union boss of one of these teachers unions or whatever. This is from several years ago, but they said something about like, I'll start paying attention to what school children need when they start paying dues. And it was like blown up by everyone that's a school choice advocate.
That was, I think, also the same person.
It wasn't.
I think so. I think it was Randy said that as well.
But it was like the idea that it's just like for teachers unions, the union comes first. The teachers and all of, the students and whatever, that's secondary. As long as our teachers are taken care of, the kids' needs come second. So I think like it's just this popular perception that teachers are like the greatest heroes in the world, and that the union just represents this league of greatest heroes in the world, and they generally get a pass. But when an article comes out like this to kind of lead to your next point that you're going to make, it's like, how do they not know that this was going to bring in a huge amount of controversy? I mean, the World Economic Forum, and I've said this on other videos, they're an international institute that has been able to kind of fly under the radar. I know that they get attention for their Davos retreats and all of that, but like generally speaking, until we like really started shining a light on them and the ESG and the Great Reset and all of that, they were kind of flying under the radar. But in the past 5 years, I mean, they've just been kind of the poster child of like this globalist movement. This everything bad about like the globalist concept is like the World Economic Forum is a caricature of. So like, how do they not see this coming? This is quite an announcement.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying that they hid that they were in it for themselves. Although I do think that they would often talk as though, and they still would today, that they're doing it. This is all for the betterment of society and the kids and whatever. But my point was like, I don't remember them ever saying like, we're pro, like open borders, or we need to, we support like medical procedures on little kids to basically castrate them chemically so that they become a different gender. Like, I don't remember that kind of thing. Even the left wing, whatever the left wing version of it was, like, did they ever openly come out in favor of gay marriage or something like in the 90s? Was that a thing? I mean, maybe it was. I don't know, but it just seems strange.
I'm Googling it, just because. And the first thing that came up when I Googled like AFP controversial announcement was an article from the New York Post from about a year ago saying that AFT to vote on controversial proposals, including ending U.S. military aid to Israel, protecting pro-Palestinian protesters. So I don't know. I feel like they do kind of make a habit
That's
of.
recent though. I'm saying, what about like 15 years ago? Like, what about then? That's my point. Yeah, I agree. Probably within the last several years, I would be willing to bet that ever since Trump became president, they've gone totally off the wall, because all of these institutions have gone totally off the wall since he became president. I think because they were always crazy secretly, the leadership of these things, but they never felt like they could just openly come out and say, yeah, we're in favor of this like ultra radical position that almost, very small percentage of America agrees with. But I think for some reason that they think, and what's really strange is it seems to be associated with Trump, and it all kind of aligns with him. But Trump won the most recent presidential election in a really remarkable rebuke of like the other side of things. And instead of all these institutions looking at that and saying, wow, it really seems like America has rejected our way of dealing with things. They don't want it. We better try to moderate again like we used to when Barack Obama was president and Bill Clinton and, like that kind of thing. Instead, they've just like completely doubled down on the ideas that were just radically, totally and completely rejected in the election. And I can't really understand that. It just is this. As a strategy, it makes no sense. And the WEF is actually worse than even some of the other crazy things in here, because at least those things, it's like policies or ideas. And it's like, we like this policy or we like this idea and we're going to promote it. But partnering with the WEF is like a whole institution, and they're not a grassroots, socialist institution. They're an elitist, progressive, centralized control institution. And what really can they offer with curriculum standards that these people can't dream up on their own? Do they really need them to help with curriculum standards? It's almost like they're doing it like this seems like, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but doesn't this seem like something Donald Trump would do to trick the other side into losing their minds about things? Like, doesn't it feel a little bit like that? Like, oh, actually, I'm going to partner with XYZ group and I know they're going to lose their minds. I have no reason to partner with these people, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know they're going to lose their minds. And that's what I want. It really feels that way, doesn't it? Because I don't know why else you would do this.
Yeah, I know. It's just like the World Economic Forum has had quite a past couple of years, especially in light of the ESG thing completely blowing up, and the infamous now apology video for the Great Reset campaign that they did, that I'm sure that we've done videos on. I think Klaus Schwab, I think he's still technically the president, but like he's on his way out, right? They kind of like pushed him into retirement or something. Is he done? Is he done? Whatever his legacy there, his mark has been made on that, probably for the rest of that organization's life. But so after I saw this article, I just started doing a little Googling with the World Economic Forum and curriculum standards. The latest kind of official paper that they released is what's on the screen now. This is a white paper from January of 2023, Defining Education 4.0, a taxonomy for the future of learning. So I barely just started kind of leafing through this, but you can kind of see just in the table of contents the sort of thing that this organization talks about. An overview of the Education 4.0 taxonomy, ability and skills, attitudes and values, and knowledge and information. And as you scroll through this and kind of look through it, you just see a whole lot of red flags talking about global citizenship. There's a lot of, they don't say the words climate change in here, but they talk about environmental stewardship, which they're basically just using as an interchangeable term for that. There's a lot of stuff about equity in here. Basically, like if you were to just take the the ESG concept, and just like filtered it through like ChatGPT and asked it to come up with a curriculum standard based on ESG, I feel like it would have spit this paper out. That's like my first vibes when I was just kind of combing through this paper earlier. But yeah, so I don't know, Justin. I mean, how is this? Do you think that this is going to have an effect on our education system, like a profound effect on our education system? Or do you think this is just a little bit more shock headline than anything?
It's hard to imagine things getting worse than they already are.
Fair.
Our education system has been plummeting in the rankings for, years and years and years now. The teachers unions have become increasingly more insane. The kind of thing that's being taught in schools, depending on where you live, has gotten increasingly more radical. There's lots of examples of that. We've had the adoption of Common Core and all of the crazy stuff that came after Common Core, the sort of Common Core 2.0, the social emotional learning stuff that came out, which is kind of like left-wing ideological views on the psychology of children and how you treat children and that sort of thing. We've had all of that stuff happen. The schools moving away, and this is actually reversing a little bit, but schools moving away from vocational practices and embracing more of like these, well, math and science and that sort of thing has been more heavily emphasized, but also just like social causes and that kind of stuff. And that's been completely catastrophic now that we have the rise of artificial intelligence and everything. The idea that you're training like this whole, generation of mathematicians, which was always like a stupid idea to begin with, is now even dumber than ever, because the mathematicians we already have are going to struggle to get jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. And they'll be completely and utterly useless beyond that, because we have this super intelligent machine now that can do any math that we need instantaneously. And we need almost no human beings working on it anymore, other than the people who are working on those machines, which is a tiny group of people. So it's like all this stuff that they've done, every decision that they've made in education has been a disaster for decades and decades and decades in the public schools. And the results show it. Our children are more depressed than ever. They're committing suicide at higher rates. There's nothing good about what's happening with younger people, really, in a lot of ways. There's very little good that's gone on. And what good has happened is not related to the public schools. Mm-hmm. So bringing the World Economic Forum in is not going to make things better. But again, like, it's kind of hard to imagine it'll make things worse. Yes, they will promote all these crazy Davos values about global citizenship and all of that, but that was probably happening anyway, which again is why I don't really understand why they would do this. It's just so strange that they would do it because of all of that. Now, one area where you might be able to say, okay, well, this might explain it, other than the trolling theory that I had before, the Trumpian trolling theory, which frankly, they're probably not bold enough to do, is I imagine that the teachers unions are heavily financed by a lot of big left-wing donors who are, more on the elitist progressive side of things. I don't know if like the Open Societies Foundations, that's the George Soros group, I don't know if those kinds of people fund the teachers unions. I haven't looked it up recently, but I'm willing to bet that there is a lot of that going on. And I imagine that those people really like the World Economic Forum. And so I can imagine them putting pressure on the teachers union to say, you should be working with these people over here. They've got all these great ideas. And I could see that happening because of how dependent they might have become on that. But that's just a theory. I mean, in reality, there really aren't a lot of good explanations for why they would do this. It's so stupid. I don't know why they would do it. But you know what? I'm glad they did. It's actually a great thing, because if you didn't have enough reasons to be skeptical of the teachers unions, like if you're on the right, you now have all the reasons in the world to be skeptical. Like the same people that were doing the Great Reset and want like social credit scores for all of these companies, and they want to remake the world and push the reset button on capitalism, and the people who are best friends with Joe Biden and John Kerry and all of these people, these elite institutions that everybody on the right hates today, are now trying to educate your kids through the teachers unions. And so if you even lean slightly to the right, if you're just in the middle and you just don't like progressives, this should alienate you enough that you realize the teachers unions are a huge problem and really should be thrown out of all of our schools, because they're clearly not unbiased groups of people who are just trying to educate kids. They have a clear ideological agenda. They're very open about it. And now they're working with globalist institutions that don't like American sovereignty and want to teach your kids to be like good little global UN Davos citizens. And that's, what more do you need? Right. So I think that it's good in that sense. It's always good for people to show their true colors so you can make an informed decision. So I'm hoping that's what comes out of this.
So it's kind of interesting because, I just Googled World Economic Forum in quotes and American Federation of Teachers in quotes to see, what comes up. And I think that's what comes up is kind of revealing of just like America's general taste for this sort of partnership. Because the only things that came up was this Blaze article, a New York Post article, and like a Yahoo article, all of which are being critical of this. The article that we just had up from the Blaze started off with dystopian nightmare in quotes as like their lead of it, right? It wasn't like CNN, like historic partnership. This is going to be the future of education or anything like that. There's no like in support of this sort of thing. But one thing that I did find was this is what I have on the screen now. It's the keynote address by the Randi Weingarten when she announced this. And it says, so, just to actually get down to like what this person actually said, just to put it in some context here. It talks about how the AFT, the United Federation of Teachers, and the New York State United Teachers have partnered with Micron on an advanced technology framework to help high school students hone the foundational skills necessary for career success in the booming semiconductor industry. And we are partnering with the World Economic Forum to create a curriculum that will lead to good jobs and solid careers in U.S. manufacturing. The goal of education should be to hone, I already mentioned all of this stuff, but it seems like, because one thing that I'll give World Economic Forum some credit for, or Klaus Schwab some credit for, is they very much are like tuned in to the whole fourth industrial revolution concept and emerging technologies, the idea of advanced automation, artificial intelligence, all of that sort of thing. So is it possible that this curriculum is going to be more about kind of skilling the next generation in an environment where, we don't necessarily need human coders anymore? Justin, you and I, not on the show, have talked about the idea of like advanced manufacturing returning to the United States. So is it possible, Justin, that is where this is all going to lie, and it's less about creating foot soldiers for the globalist, movement of the future, and more about just like making sure that citizens have the skills to adapt to a work environment that is more defined by advanced robotics and artificial intelligence?
I think that regardless of whether they do that, they're going to have all the global citizenship stuff as part of the pie.
Fair.
Right. It's like when you go to a religious soup kitchen, like they're gonna have the They're going to have the cross on the wall and the Bibles that they hand out to people on the way out the door if they want them. They're going to offer that, right? Like they're going to take the opportunity to talk about their religion while providing you with the service at the same time. Now, I'm not disparaging that. I understand why they do that. It makes sense. I think this is the same kind of thing. Like, even if they have some good ideas in there, because the World Economic Forum is actually more forward looking than a lot of other institutions have been historically. Progressive institutions, they tend to be very slow moving and bureaucratic. And the World Economic Forum has been very much a futurist type organization. And I think that they've been right on and predicting a lot of things. But you're going to get all the global citizenship, Agenda 2030. You're going to get all that's from the UN. You're going to get all that stuff with it. You're not going to be able to just get the good training part and then not the other stuff. And that assumes that the good training part is even in there, which we don't know for sure.
No, we don't.
I mean, they mentioned, and this wasn't the World Economic Forum, so I can't blame this on them, but in the same paragraph that you were referencing from her speech, Weingarten pointed out that they're partnering with some other group, some other business or something, partnered with Micron, an advanced technology framework on an advanced to help high school students hone the foundational skills necessary for career success in the booming semiconductor industry. That's going to all be robots. Like you're not going to have people hand making semiconductors and stuff like that. Like, I don't even know what that means. But what are you going to teach a high school kid about semiconductors other than building them, which again is not going to be something that they do if people are, I don't even know if people build them now. I bet a lot of that stuff is made by machines already. Sure. So I don't, so I don't know how forward looking it really is. It seems to me, it seems strange. And I also find it strange too, that the people on the left, because remember that this is a more of a socialist type group, not the World Economic Forum, but the AFT, the National Education Association. Like these groups tend to lean more towards socialism and that wing of things, not necessarily progressivism per se. I think it's just strange that they would say, who we should go to help us with the curriculum standard? We should go to the elites. Mm-hmm. And the elites are going to tell us how to make a curriculum that empowers kids to become cogs in these gigantic corporate manufacturing machines. And it's like, I thought that idea had already been like soundly rejected. that was something that they came up with like in the early progressive era, like 100 years ago. And that everybody at this point was like, yeah, that wasn't great that we had like all these progressives of that time trying to teach our kids to become just basically manufacturing, tools of society. We stopped teaching them how to do critical thinking and philosophy and classical education, and we started trying to get them to just become parts of these large corporations. Well, it's like, this is the same. I mean, what do you think that their World Economic Forum is going to recommend now? It's not going to teach them to be critical thinkers and to question authority. And they're not going to be reading John Locke. That's not going to be the recommendation. The recommendation is going to be like, let's teach them how to fit into our gigantic machines, corporate machines. Like that's what we're going to try to do. And so it just seems like such a bizarre thing. It's a really strange partnership. That's why it makes me think money must be involved, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Get a pipeline right into the Young Global Leaders program. Yeah.
It's so weird. It's so weird to me. I don't know. But who knows with these people?
All right. Well, on the note of artificial intelligence, the next thing that I want to play, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to. If I can't get the audio to work, we'll just move on to the next topic. But this is something that I wanted your reaction to. I put all of that, all of that little asterisk stuff in there because I just got a notification that there is an issue with our ability to do sound. So let's see if this works. So I want to show a clip of Sam Altman. This is the CEO of OpenAI, which is probably the most influential artificial intelligence company out there, right up there with Google's Gemini and everything. This is the OpenAI is they do ChatGPT. So this is him. This is Sam Altman at a recent conference that he was at, where he was asked about what worries him most about the idea of artificial intelligence. And just to set up even more context to a clip that I might not even be able to play audio of, let me actually see if we can do it before I talk more.
AI is eventually.
Did you hear that? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So artificial intelligence, AI. There's artificial general intelligence, that's AGI. That's this idea that artificial intelligence could basically do anything at a level that a human can. Basically, a diverse amount of things that an AI can do, not just like very narrowly focused. AGI is, it could basically generally do anything that a human can do. Artificial superintelligence, ASI, this is what OpenAI is actively striving towards now, overtly saying that they are striving towards artificial superintelligence. That is an artificial intelligence that exceeds human intelligence basically in every realm. This is like a science fiction level of artificial intelligence. So the interviewer is asking Sam Altman, again, CEO of OpenAI, what scares him most about this concept of artificial superintelligence. So this is just kind of an assortment of clips. It's kind of edited down, so I'm just going to go ahead and play this. Justin, if you want to interject, feel free. I'll just hit pause. But yeah, I want your reaction to this.
Actually going to kill us all. What does keep you up at night?
I think there's 3 scary categories. There's a bad guy gets superintelligence first and misuses it before the rest of the world has a powerful enough version to defend. So an adversary of the US says, I'm going to use this superintelligence to design a bioweapon to take down the United States power grid, to, break into the financial system and take everyone's money. That's broad category 1. I think that the bio capability of these models, the cybersecurity capability of these models, these are getting quite significant. We continue to flash the warning lights on this. I think the world is not taking us seriously. I don't know what else we can do there, but this is a very big thing coming. Category 2 is the sort of broadly called loss of control incidents, where that's kind of like the sci-fi movie. The AI is like, oh, I don't actually want you to turn me off. I'm afraid I can't do that, whatever. There's a lot of work we and other companies do on model alignment to prevent that from happening. But as these systems become so powerful, that's a real concern. The third one is, to me, more difficult to imagine, but quite scary. And I'll explain what it is, and then I'll give a short-term and a long-term example. This is the category where the models kind of accidentally take over the world. They never wake up. They never do the sci-fi thing. They never open the pod bay doors, but they just become so ingrained in society, and they're so much smarter than we are. And we can't really understand what they're doing, but we do kind of have to rely on them. And even without a drop of malevolence from anyone, society can just veer in a sort of strange direction. But this phenomenon, I think, is a really big deal. In the short term, you can see it where people we call this emotional over-reliance. People rely on ChatGPT too much. There's young people who just say, I can't make any decision in my life without telling ChatGPT everything that's going on. It knows me. It knows my friends. I'm going to do whatever it says. That feels really bad to me. The longer term category is, what if AI gets so smart that the president of the United States cannot do better than following ChatGPT 7's recommendation? That might be the right decision in any individual case, but it means that society has collectively transitioned a significant part of decision making to this very powerful system that is learning from us, improving for us, evolving with us, but in ways we don't totally understand. So that's the third category of.
So yeah,
so
Justin,
let's get back to work building it. Gotta go, guys. I got a lot of work to do.
Right. So I mean, he presents it in 3 categories. The first one is the idea that some benevolent actors are going to use artificial superintelligence to create some virus, super virus, whether a computer or an actual virus, right, to do substantial harm to the population. The second category is that it just takes over. It becomes Skynet. It starts sending Terminators after Justin. Not me though, because I'm in good with the robots. So those are the first two, and I feel like those are the first two categories. Those first two categories that he outlines are kind of the ones that are like most on the front of mind for, you know, your average person, even your average person that's like specifically thinking about artificial intelligence and concerns about that. But that third category, that's why I picked this video for us to watch today, because I thought that third category and the way that he outlined it was so much more of like a realistic possibility. Not to say that the first two categories aren't realistic, I think they are, but so much more like I can see that happening today. You know, like he talks about that idea of like an emotional over reliance by some people on ChatGPT, and the idea that, like, you know, you're presented with a tough decision. I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll ask it. I'll type in all of the considerations and all of the options or whatever, and whatever it like suggests me do, I'll do that, because, you know, it's good at making decisions. It knows these things, these factors, and whatever. And the idea that, like, you know, that could happen on a personal level to one person is concerning. The idea that that could happen at a macro level, on a large scale, is very concerning. Justin, what are your thoughts about that video?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing that stands out, and this is true of all these kinds of videos that are like this, but it's worth mentioning because it's a missed point. So many people don't take these kinds of things seriously, but it's important to remember that the people saying these things are the people who would know better than everybody else. These are not situations where people are speculating wildly who have no business talking about this kind of stuff. It's often the people who are in charge of these technology companies who have the most knowledge about it saying, hey, just so that everybody knows, there's a lot of problems here and a lot of potential dangers and stuff. And so I think it's worth just pointing that out, that this is, it probably sounds to some people watching this like, this is too crazy. And like, oh, you know, how is this going to happen? It's like, well, this guy would know. And it's not just him. There's a lot of other people like Elon Musk and others who are heavily involved in AI who say, yes, this is the way things, you know, these are real legitimate threats. You're right that you don't hear about the third one that he mentioned as often, and that it is, I would argue, almost guaranteed if the first two things don't happen.
Sure.
So, like, if the first two things happen, the third thing doesn't matter. If the first two things don't happen, the third thing is almost certainly going to happen, and in which case you have to deal with at least that, right? So this becomes the floor, I think. I think there is no scenario in which people do not become really reliant on this technology. I've seen it in my personal life. I've seen it with people that I know who started using it, and suddenly they're asking it advice about everything.
Right.
And on one level, you almost can't argue against it. There is a logic to it, because you could say, all right, well, the worst that this thing could do is be as flawed as I am and be as bad at making decisions as I am. That's kind of the worst case scenario, isn't it? That's how a lot of people probably look at it. So why wouldn't I rely on this when there's a chance that it knows more than I do, because it's smarter than me and it can consume a lot more information than I can? So I should rely on it. And as it gets better, because there are still reasons not to rely on it now, like the research capabilities of it are not always accurate. Sometimes it just manifests, you know, things. If you we've done a lot of work with AI, so we know. I mean, if you ask it to do research, or you ask it complicated questions or something that are research-based questions, sometimes it just fabricates evidence out of thin air that doesn't exist. It'll even make citations to things that don't really exist in the real world, but it's pretends that it does exist. And so it does that kind of stuff. It's not as reliable, but once it gets more reliable, and which is happening every day it's getting more reliable. So when the day comes in a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, or whenever, when you use it and basically every time you use it, it's giving you really high quality results, at that point in time, why would you trust yourself and your analytical ability more than you trust this, when it's always giving you the right answer and you know that it has a lot more knowledge and capability than you do. I mean, seems like common sense. And for policymakers, forget about people in their personal lives and stuff like that. I mean, for policymakers, for bureaucrats, for, regulators, and, he mentioned the president, all sorts of people in government that make decisions every day. AI probably will be better at making decisions than that. So there is a real thing there. So my concern, though, so I guess this all begs the question, well, then why be concerned about it? Right? Maybe we all just do whatever AI says. I think the reason we should be concerned is because AI doesn't have the values that people have. It doesn't weigh them the same way, and it doesn't have a commitment to, certain, what we would call like inalienable truths or higher truths, higher values, things that are not necessarily based on like a utilitarian ends justify the means kinds of thing, because it doesn't necessarily have that belief. It could, but it doesn't necessarily have it for sure. And it could change its mind in the future. You always run the risk that this technology starts eroding sort of fundamental rights and truths and important ideas and things that happen in culture that are distinctly for humans.
Right.
And that, I think, is, and the thing is, on option number 3, it's not even necessarily, it doesn't have to be malevolent. It could just be that AI moves society in that direction over time because it's doing what it thinks is the right thing always, but what it thinks is the right thing is not the same as the values that we have.
Right.
You know, so that to me is the thing that really bothers me the most. Like, if we get to the point where someday we don't need accountants because AI is always a better accountant than all the human accountants, then that is fine, I think. But it's going to create a lot of job disruption, but that's a separate, issue. My concern is when it starts making decisions that lead to changes in culture and values and things like that and human rights, then how do we, when do we know to ignore it? How do we make those decisions?
Well, right, because how artificial intelligence is making its decisions. A lot of these people that, again, talking in this field, that are in this field, talk about how it's like essentially like a black box. Like they talk about how like sometimes they don't even know what exactly is going into the decision making of artificial intelligence, or in some cases what the company that built the AI trained it on exactly, right? So the example of like China's DeepSeek artificial intelligence. Oh, we don't want to talk about anything that's negative to the Communist government party here. Like, let's just move on, talk about something else, right? So there's always that level of it. I think at this point, especially with like ChatGPT, maybe I'm being totally naive here, but like it does seem like it's just this little insular thing that's just like a trial run with no like overt political or ideological agenda, other than just kind of like what's passively on the internet, stuff like that. But like, if I were to, hey, ChatGPT, we're gonna watch a movie. We like these sorts of movies. We're kind of into this. Like, what's the movie that we should watch? And it spits out an answer. That's one thing, right? But like, if it's manipulated or has like some things, drivers behind it, it's like, oh well, because of our partnership with ABC, you should check out the newest season of Survivor or something like that. Like it's kind of coercing you in a way, or maybe it's not even up front. Maybe there is some partnership with ABC, but it doesn't tell you that, and it wants you to watch Survivor. Or what if it's like, well, to expand your perspectives on equity and inclusion, we want you to watch this show or something. There's like those at just a very personal level. But then at like those higher up levels, when he's talking about the president of the United States and the decision making that the country, like on that scale, like 100% similar things could occur. I mean, the idea that like we already use advanced algorithms and computer systems to run like war game simulations, and in the future having super advanced artificial intelligence, running war game simulations on a whole host of things. Maybe it's monetary policy, maybe it's domestic policy, maybe it's actual war. And it's coming out with, we've run 4,000 simulations in the past minute and a half, and this is where you should bomb and how you should do it and the timeline that it occurs. Like, at some point, humans might think, well, it's the expert, let's do that. So I think that's what he's describing when it's this idea that it could almost like passively take over the world. It's not some like new consciousness that's created. It's just like this black box algorithm, advanced artificial intelligence that's shifting the world, and like you were saying, in a direction that kind of where it thinks it ought to go, and that's horribly scary. It's a really scary concept.
Well, and it's especially scary because it really feels like this is coming about in the context, in a societal and cultural context that is just it's just set up perfectly for catastrophe, because our current Western societies, for the most part, especially in North America and in Europe, we have to a large extent adopted this sort of postmodern idea about truth, and we have shifting standards of determining what is true and what isn't, what is good, what is not good. And so much of, especially what is on the left-wing ideology, is driven by like a kind of brute utilitarianism, where the idea is whatever works, and all these quaint notions about like individual rights and stuff like that get in the way of progress. That's how they are always framing it. Like, you people who are constantly clinging to your guns and religion, and you don't want high taxes, and you don't want, controls on disinformation and all of this. The world is a worse place because of you people, because you keep talking about all these rights. These rights are getting in the way of things. Like, we could get rid of gun violence if we just got rid of the Second Amendment. We could get rid of, all sorts of false beliefs in society if we just ban disinformation on the internet and misinformation. Like, they have all these, really a lot of the disputes between the left and the right, not all of them, but a lot of them in America are centered around the right is trying to protect a right, even if it means that there could theoretically be a bad outcome involved in protecting the right. The right is more important than the outcome, even though most of the time people on the right would say protecting the right leads to better outcomes anyway. They would say, even if it doesn't, I protect freedom of speech no matter what. Like, that's the idea, right? But on the left, they're always saying, let's sacrifice these rights in order to better society as they see it. And so the reason I bring all this up is, in a world where you don't have like an ironclad, this is my standard of truth and morality, and I don't ever violate it, which is basically the modern left today, then it is so easy to just believe, well, whatever AI tells me, because as the left says all the time, the science is settled. I believe in science, right? Like, they say that all the time, as if that's like their North Star is whatever science says. Now, that's not true, of course, and they manipulate the science all the time. But the point is, if you believe that, then it's not hard at all to go from that point in time to a point in time where you just listen to the ultimate mathematician and scientist, the one who is better at math and science than everybody else in the world. And if that thing, in this case, AI, says you should do this, eliminate this right, or transform society in this way, or whatever, and it will lead to better outcomes, then I would think that the left would find that much more appealing than the right, who would say, even if you could somehow prove to me that banning free speech would lead to better outcomes, I still wouldn't do it. But see, the left would. So it just seems like they're perfectly set up to fall into this AI trap of, yeah, I'm going to depend on AI to make these decisions for us as a society because the science is settled, it knows more than we do. And the problem the right has, especially in combating something like that, is how do you argue against it if you're admittedly dumber than AI? Like, how do I say, oh no, AI is wrong? Like, I can't say that I know for sure that AI is wrong if you're talking about facts and figures and outcomes. So the only argument I can make is, I don't care if AI is right. I don't think we should do XYZ crazy thing that it might be recommending at the moment, because that's an infringement on somebody's rights. And that to me is more important than the outcome. But the left rejects that at baseline and says, I don't care about that. Just like they do with guns, just like they do with guns and religion and a whole bunch of other topics, where they stopped people from going to church during COVID because they said it was a public health crisis. So people can't go to church. So your right to worship God was less than the progressive value of slowing the spread of COVID, which of course it didn't do anyway, but that was the point. And the same thing is true with guns, right? Your right to protect yourself in your home and defend yourself from a tyrannical government is less than our need as a society to reduce gun deaths. So we take away your guns. And your right to say what you believe on the internet is less than our belief that we need to stop the spread of disinformation. So we don't want you to say things on the internet. We want to create rules for that. That's how they make every decision. Right. Well, AI is perfect for them then, because AI would probably be very willing to do that. And that to me is like, I don't know how you avoid that problem. That seems like a freight train that is coming for our country. Yeah. And the whole West. And we have no way of stopping it, it seems.
Yeah. Artificial intelligence, while being kind of like I find it personally interesting. I think, Justin, you agree with this, that it is, if it's not already, it will quickly become like the most important, at least in terms of the implications that it has, issue going on in America. So, if you like artificial intelligence, make sure you're tuning into, or at least and concerned, I guess, about the potential implications it has on individual liberty, personal autonomy. Make sure you make a habit out of tuning into Justin and Donald Save America. So a new segment that we're going to have on Justin and Donald Save America, hopefully on every episode, is going to be our Stopping Socialism segment. So yes, Stopping Socialism. This is kind of the issue area in which we really kind of, made a stake for ourselves on. But the topic that I wanted to talk about today actually relates to a prediction that Justin made back after the Trump was just recently reelected, right? So there was a lot of talk about what's going to happen in the country over the next 4 years under Donald Trump. What are the Democrats going to do, after a resounding loss in the 2024 election? And Justin made the prediction that we're going to see on the left a shift towards their version of populism, which is, of course, socialism or democratic socialism. Now, I will admit, when you made that prediction back in, November of 2024, I thought, maybe you're right. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I really didn't buy into it. I wasn't sure that they were going to go in that direction. But now, as every week that goes by, it feels like there are more and more data points that aim to Justin being correct on this issue. I think the Zoran Mamdani, the mayoral candidate in New York City, would agree with you that the left is shifting more towards socialism. That guy in Minnesota, I don't know his name, but he probably agrees with you. And this Fox News article that I have up on the screen also appears to agree with you. The headline is Young Progressives Look to Zoran Mamdani, AOC as future of the Democratic Party. Under one condition. And basically that one condition is they need to be like as radical as possible. But it's talking about this recent summit, this recent event, the Voters of Tomorrow Summit that was hosted in Washington, D.C. It featured just all stars of the Democratic Party, including U.S. Representative Ro Khanna of California and that stud muffin of a masculine guy, former DNC Vice Chair David Hogg. They were in attendance there. But this article basically is just talking to a whole bunch of progressive activist types there, talking about how the future of the Democratic Party is democratic socialism. So Justin, I don't know if you want to take a victory lap now, or if there's some nuance you want to add to your prediction that you made, or if you don't want to spike the football quite yet and want to wait to the future. But it appears pretty clearly that this is the direction that the Democratic Party is going in. Am I speaking out of turn here?
No, this is definitely the direction they're going in. I was, as usual, right. And very humble guy, as you can tell. I think this is so obvious because the left has there's a couple reasons why. The left has always had a tendency to drift more toward socialism, especially among younger people. That's always been a thing on the left. Going back 60, 70, 80 years, 100 years, they've always wanted to drift in that direction. But then what happens is political realism like gets in the way of that. And they at some point get tired of losing. And they say, no, we can't go that far. So we have to move to the center. And they kind of get dragged to the center a little bit. And the young people just kind of go along with it because they really don't have anywhere else to go. If you're young and you're leftist, you're not going to go vote for Republicans. So it's sort of like reluctantly going along with it. But then what happens is when the progressive elitist wing of the party doesn't do very well, they utilize that as an as sort of like proof. We have to go back to our socialist, populist roots, because that's how we win elections. We got to go back to that. And this pendulum swings back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This has happened throughout the course of history. And then eventually they usually lose badly when they do that. And then when they do that, they because America is not really a socialist country. And so they lose badly and then they're forced back to the center again. Right. So one of the best examples of this, if you're a historian, you love history, a history lover, you're a older person, you probably remember this, like when George McGovern and some of the candidates, Hubert Humphrey, in that period of time. So we're talking about into the 70s and 80s when they were running for office. Those were far left-wing people, and Ronald Reagan in particular mopped the floor with them. And after getting just getting destroyed by Ronald Reagan and then losing to George H.W. Bush, who was Ronald Reagan's, really just part of the Ronald Reagan movement. He was Reagan's vice president. They turned to who? They turned to Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton was Mr. Middle of the Road. I'm a Southern Democrat, moderate is how he presented himself. He was for closing down the border. He was for traditional views on marriage. He was for welfare reform and forcing people to go to work in order to get welfare benefits. I mean, all of these things today would be completely rejected by the left, and they were not considered far left-wing views at that time either. And so the idea was you move to the center. Well, then they won elections, right? They won 2 presidential elections in a row with Clinton, and he was actually pretty popular. And so that's kind of the same story that's playing out, I think, now, except the problem the left has in this current situation is, in order for the cycle to work itself out, they have to get their butts handed to them when they run their far left-wing candidate. And unfortunately, what's happened from their perspective is they never got their chance. See, because Bernie was their guy. That was their far left-wing. That was their true believer. This guy really is he means it. He's not part of the establishment populist guy. But he got screwed out of 2 presidential primaries.
2 times.
Twice he got screwed by the elites. And
Right.
then the elites ran their people. And in the first case, Hillary Clinton, and they lost in shocking fashion. And then they thought they were going to get Bernie the second time, but they got screwed at the last minute out of that. And Joe Biden ended up getting it basically not installed, isn't quite fair, but
it's fair enough. He was basically installed.
Basically, Joe Biden was not winning any primaries
Right.
until
everyone dropped out at the same time.
Everyone dropped out at the same time right before Super Tuesday. And the socialist wing of that election did not have time to coalesce in the same way because the vote was split between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders at the time. So they didn't have time to kind of come back together again. And by the time they did, it was too late. And so and that was driven by the party leadership and the big donors and everything, right? So they never got Bernie. So then when Biden lost to Trump the second time, or Kamala technically lost to Trump the second time, they still have this feeling of like, we got to go back to the left again. They never got their opportunity to quote unquote prove themselves, right? Like they never got that opportunity. So they're not convinced that they're the problem, which is ironic because Joe Biden was not Bill Clinton. He was not a moderate. Right. He was presented as a moderate, but he governed as a far left-wing guy. He didn't really govern at all. The people around him were really the ones in charge. He was like mentally insane by that point in time. And the people around him were the ones in charge, and they governed like far left-wing people. So we got all the bad left-wing policies, maybe not quite as far as the Bernie people would like, but pretty far. I mean, Bernie Sanders was working with Joe Biden to put together the transition team and cabinet members and all of that stuff. Like they were all part of that movement together. And so we got all the bad policies. Americans then rejected the crazy bad policies and got Trump, but the far left wing didn't learn its lesson because their candidate was not the one that got rejected. Mm-hmm. So they still haven't had that chance yet. So they want it. Now, so all of that's to say, I believe that this pattern was going to play out again. I see that it's happening again. I think it makes sense, especially because a lot of the Trump Democrats, like what you would think of as the Joe Rogans of the world and people like that, were all Bernie people. They were all more like democratic socialist leaning people in the past. And so it makes total sense that if you're the far left, you'd say, look, we could win those people back. They were on our side not that long ago. We just have to become more populist and stop trying to run these progressive elites. And so they're going to really try hard. The problem they have, the only thing standing in their way is all of the far left-wing people that they have stuck as candidates.
Well,
forget about the policies. They're just like terrible, unlikable people. Yeah. And that's the problem. That's the real crisis they have. Like Bernie Sanders, as much as I think he's a lunatic and I can't stand him, I at least get it. I get it. As a politician, if Bernie was like 45 and running, I could understand why people would like it from a left-wing populist perspective. But AOC is a clown. AOC is a clown, and Mamdani is literally like a former rapper. Like, he's a clown. These people are like a joke. They're bad candidates. They're just bad candidates. And that's why I'm not sure that they can win in a primary because of that alone.
Well, and to your point before, like when you're the Democratic Party and you're losing like Cenk Uygur, like the Young Turks guy, and he's like blasting you, for running like Hillary Clinton again. you've kind of like, or not in a good way. But while you were talking, and we're gonna wrap up this show, we're already north of an hour here. But while you were talking, I pulled up Polymarket. This is their odds for the Democratic presidential nominee for 2028. As you could see, leading the pack, Gavin Newsom at 20% odds. AOC not too far behind at 16% odds. Pete Buttigieg at 12%. Andy Bashar at 6%. Josh Shapiro 6%. Kamala Harris 6%. Gretchen Whitmer 5%. Wes Moore 5%. This goes all the way down to Stephen A. Smith and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that are pulling in a nice 2% each. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is on there. I've heard him talked about in these conversations. He's down at 2%. Michelle Obama's 1%. If she actually had any intention on running, she would definitely be north of 20%. There's no doubt about that.
She would have already done it, would have already been the candidate, and would have already won more likely than not. So that's not going to happen. Tim
Walz, Rahm Emanuel, John Fetterman, Barack Obama. Well, he can't even run. Why would they even have him on this list?
You never know.
So LeBron James, a lot of these people, Hillary Clinton, a lot of these people pulling in 1%, but it seems like as of now, and obviously we're so far out, this is not even reality, but it's just for fun. It's just like a few person race here. I'll just say the top 5: Gavin Newsom, AOC, Buttigieg, Bashir, and Josh Shapiro. Out of this, no, I'm not going to hold you to this prediction, Justin. If you're right, I will. But I won't going to hold you to this because we are so far out. But if you had to make a prediction as of August of 2025, who are you putting your money on?
Oh, boy. Okay, well, I'll start off by saying I don't think that a socialist is likely to win.
The nominee.
I think they're likely to gain lots of attention and popularity and be a viable threat, but I don't think they're going to win. And the reason is actually you see it on the odds there, and you see it in poll results too. When you add up the Gavin Newsoms of the world and the Mayor Petes and all those kinds of candidates together, they usually are considered to be, as a group, much more likely to win than any one socialist candidate. Again, because the AOCs of the world are not good candidates. So the only way an AOC or somebody like that would win, Bernie's too old, especially after everything that happened, and he's had a heart attack and stuff like that. So there's no way he's going to run as the main candidate. He might run as a VP, but he won't run as the main candidate. The only way that's going to happen then is if basically there's too many people in the race, not moderates, but progressives in the race, and they don't drop out, and a candidate can win with 25% of the vote, which an AOC type might be able to get. And that's how Trump became president the first time. It was very much that same way. The establishment Republican candidates didn't drop out, and so the vote was split amongst all these people. That's the only way. But the Democrats are much more likely to avoid that scenario because they're just better at this kind of game, and they know how to push out the socialists. They've done it already to Bernie twice before. They'll do it again to AOC or whoever else is the main person. So they will eventually coalesce around one sort of elite progressive type candidate. So the question is, who is that going to be? And of the people that you mentioned, I would say that if I had to put money on it, I'd put money on Gavin Newsom. I think he's horribly unlikable. He comes across as like a sleazy car salesman type guy at worst. At best, he's like, well, not at worst, but I think mid-level, that's kind of where he's at. At best, he's like a douche tech bro type guy you don't want to spend time with. And he's a total hypocrite, and he's from California, and there's just so many reasons why I don't think he's a good candidate. But I also think that he has, similar to Hillary Clinton, who was a bad candidate, and Joe Biden, who was a bad candidate, and Kamala Harris, who's a bad candidate, and John Kerry, who was a bad candidate, and Al Gore, who was a bad candidate. You can't go wrong by picking a bad candidate if you're guessing who the Democrats are going to go with.
Sure.
They usually have bad candidates. He is in with the party elites. He's got a lot of fundraising capacity. He comes from the biggest state with the most Democrat money, the most Democrat votes, and it just makes a lot of sense.
Well,
now,
also,
that's why I would say he's got to be considered the front runner at this point.
people will probably scoff at this data point, but he's also been very vocal and prodding, and instigating on like Twitter. You know, a lot of these people that just have like an intern running their Twitter or whatever, and probably he does too, of course. But they'll usually just like post like, "Oh, he made this. You know, this politician spoke today. Here's a clip of them speaking." Like he is specifically like instigating like arguments and trying to engagement farm on Twitter. So I think that that's like an early sign that he's got national intentions.
They just don't have. I agree, and they just don't have anybody good.
Right. Well, so
You
the
know?
other thing, and this is kind of to your credit, Justin, the idea that like a socialist or a democratic socialist might not be the nominee for the Democratic Party, like an overt democratic socialist is not the nominee, you know, come 2028. That doesn't necessarily mean that this like resurgence of socialism is like dead or something like that, because this is very much is kind of a ground up movement. You know, they got to get their like their bench going first before they can kind of raise up to the next level. They got to get their double A team going before the pros really start kind of making a name for themselves. And that's actually one of the reasons why we started doing the Socialist Watch report for every, you know, midterm or general election. I think we've done 2024, 2022, and 2020. Did we do a 2018? I don't even remember. But it basically is showing all of these kind of state, federal, and even some local, more local level races and candidates that specifically had an endorsement of Democratic Socialists of America or one of these, like, again, overtly socialist groups, and their kind of win ratio when they're actually in a race. So we've been tracking kind of the socialist grassroots element getting into our political system for at least 6 years now. And this is where the real kind of test of this is going to be. It's not going to be if whether or not AOC is the Democratic candidate come 2028. Obviously, that would be a humongous sign of it. But it's this report here. So stay tuned. All the work that we're doing at the Emerging Issues Center at the Heartland Institute and this show, Justin and Donald Save America. Justin, we are long here. Any final words? Anything you want to get off your chest? Any anecdotes? Anything before we sign off for the day?
I don't think so. I'll prepare one for next time.
You better. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Justin and Donald Save America. Leave a review where that's applicable. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, share this content, subscribe if you haven't already. Even leaving a comment under the video helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Justin Haskins, where can the people go to see your latest work?
At Justin T. Haskins on X. You can also go to justinhaskins.com.
Boom. There you go. All right. Fantastic. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.